The storm on Kareth 9 was unlike anything the human had ever seen. Lightning split the violet sky, rain poured in silver sheets, and thunder rolled like the growl of giant beasts. Eli Ward pulled his coat tighter around his shoulders as he trudged along the muddy path, each step sinking deep into the alien soil. His ship had crashed miles away, broken beyond repair, and the cold wind cut through his skin like knives. He had walked for hours, searching for any shelter, but every door had closed in his face. The locals feared him. They whispered that humans were trouble, that they brought war and danger wherever they went. Eli was tired of proving he wasn't like that. All he wanted tonight was a roof over his head and a little warmth to stop his shaking hands. In the distance, he saw a faint golden glow, a dome-shaped home made of shimmering glass and metal. Small and round like an insect nest, he stumbled toward it, each breath turning into mist in the cold air. When he reached the door, he knocked gently, trying not to sound desperate. For a long moment, there was no answer. Only the sound of the rain beating against the metal walls. Then a soft voice came from inside, musical and cautious. "Who is it?" Eli leaned closer and said, "A traveler. My ship went down. I need shelter until the storm ends." The door opened just a crack, and two bright silver eyes peered at him. The alien woman inside was slender, her greenish skin glowing faintly in the light. She looked him up and down, her expression uncertain. He could see fear in her eyes, but also something else, curiosity. "You are human," she said quietly, her voice trembling. "You will not fit here." "It will be a tight squeeze," Eli managed a tired smile. "A tight squeeze is better than freezing outside." The alien woman hesitated, then sighed softly. "All right, come in. But mind your head." Eli ducked low, squeezing through the doorway, and immediately realized how small her home was. The ceiling brushed against his shoulders, and when he tried to sit, the chair cracked under his weight. The woman gasped, and Eli quickly lifted it with care. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean—" She raised a hand gently, stopping him. "It's all right, I warned you." "Human?" she said with a faint smile. "I am Rinna." "Eli," he replied, still crouching awkwardly. "Thank you for letting me in." Rinna moved to a small stove where blue fire shimmered, pouring a glowing stew into a bowl. "Eat," she said, setting it in front of him. "You look half dead," he chuckled softly. "Feels about right," and took a spoonful. The taste was strange but comforting. A mix of sweet and smoky flavors. He felt warmth spreading through him, melting the cold ache in his bones. Rinna sat across from him, watching him with quiet interest. "You are far from any human colony," she said. "Why come here?" Eli looked down at his hands, scarred from years of mining. "I used to work on the Astera mines," he said. "But when the machines collapsed the tunnels, they blamed the humans. Even though it wasn't our fault." Rinna's eyes darkened. "My mate died in that collapse," she said softly. The room went silent, only the rain whispering outside. Eli's voice dropped. "I'm sorry." Rinna's gaze softened a little. "You did not cause it," she murmured. "But humans, they remind me of that day." He nodded slowly, understanding her pain without words. They sat in silence, two strangers joined by loss and storm. A sudden sound made them both look up. Something scraped against the wall outside, a faint, dragging noise. Rinna froze, her eyes wide. What was that? Eli stood up, his large frame casting shadows across the small room. He moved to the window and peered through the rain-streaked glass. Dark shapes moved between the lightning flashes, 3, maybe 4 figures circling the house. "They're not friends," Eli said quietly. "Stay back," Rinna's heart pounded. "Scavengers?" During the storm, Eli grabbed a metal rod from beside the heater, his muscles tensing. "They think this place is easy prey," he muttered, his voice steady but low. "They're wrong." A heavy thud hit the door, and Rinna gasped. Eli stood in front of her, his body blocking the entrance completely. The door rattled as someone tried to force it open. Rinna whispered, "They'll kill us." Eli looked back at her, his eyes fierce. "Not while I'm standing." The next moment, the door burst inward, and the storm wind screamed through the house. Figures in dark cloaks lunged inside, blades flashing in the dim light. Eli moved like a wall of muscle and fury, striking the first one aside with his arm, sending the attacker crashing into the table. The second swung, but Eli caught the weapon midair, twisted it free, and hit the raider with his shoulder. The room filled with chaos, the glow lamps flickering wildly. When it was finally over, The raiders stumbled back out into the rain, leaving behind broken chairs and silence. Eli's chest heaved as he dropped the metal rod. His arm bleeding from a deep cut, Rinna ran to him, grabbing cloth to stop the bleeding, her hands trembling. "You saved me," she whispered. Voice shaking, he gave her a tired smile. "Couldn't let them hurt you." She looked at him then, not as a human outsider, but as something rare and powerful. As thunder rolled across the sky once more, Rinna whispered, Maybe it wasn't a mistake to let you in." And Eli, sitting in her tiny home, bleeding but alive, realized this strange world had finally given him one thing he hadn't known in years: hope. When Eli woke the next morning, sunlight was streaming through the glass walls, glowing softly across the curved room. For a brief moment, he thought he was back on Earth, in one of the mining cabins near the hills, before remembering the violet sky and twin suns outside. The storm had passed, but his whole body ached, and his arm was wrapped tightly in shimmering bandage strips that smelled faintly of herbs. Rinna was already awake, crouched near a small console, repairing a broken energy cell with delicate fingers. Her movements were quick and precise. The way only a trained engineer could move, Eli sat up slowly, careful not to hit his head again on the low ceiling, though it still brushed his hair whenever he straightened up. "Morning," he said with a tired grin. Rinna looked over her shoulder, her silver eyes glinting in the light. "You humans recover fast," she said softly. "That cut would have taken my kind a week to heal." Eli chuckled. "We're built to take hits," then added, "and eat everything in sight." Her mouth curved in the faintest smile. "Yes, I noticed." She stood and handed him a steaming mug of blue liquid that smelled like fruit and metal. He took a sip and nearly coughed. "Sweet, but sharp." "It's Kelroot brew," she said. "Our kind drinks it for energy." Eli nodded, forcing another sip. "Reminds me of engine coolant." She gave him a surprised laugh, a sound light and strange, one that filled the small room with warmth. Eli smiled slightly, realizing he hadn't heard laughter like that in months. As he looked around, he noticed just how small everything was. Her tools, furniture, and doorways were made for someone half his size. Every time he turned, something clattered or creaked under his weight. When he leaned forward to stretch, his elbow bumped a shelf, knocking down tiny glass vials filled with shimmering powder. He froze, eyes wide. "Sorry." Rinna rushed over, catching one vial before it hit the floor, her eyes narrowing. "Careful," she said sharply, then took a breath, calming herself. "That's concentrated plasma dust. One spark and this whole dome would light up." Eli blinked. "You keep explosives next to the bed?" "It's a workshop, not a bedroom," she replied flatly, then hesitated, realizing her tone. "Sorry, I'm just not used to company." Eli nodded slowly. "Me neither." They spent most of the morning fixing what the storm had damaged. Eli insisted on helping, though Rinna kept glancing at him, unsure whether to stop him or be grateful. When he lifted one of the metal support beams that had bent under the storm, Rinna's eyes widened. Her tools hummed softly as she welded beside him, and for a moment they worked in quiet rhythm. One of muscle, one of precision. It felt strangely right. She caught herself staring at him once, his large hand steady and sure as he adjusted the panels, and she quickly turned away, cheeks flushing a faint gold beneath her greenish skin. As they finished the repairs, Rinna checked her scanner and frowned. The colony's main power grid was down in several sectors, meaning communication was limited. Eli noticed her worry. "Something wrong?" "Not exactly," she said. "But when the grid is down, scavengers get bold. They hunt during daylight too." Eli's jaw tightened, remembering the night before. "They'll come back?" "Maybe," she said quietly. "They saw you, a human. That makes them curious and greedy." Eli leaned back, his voice calm but low. "Let them come. I won't run." Rinna looked at him for a long moment, something unreadable in her gaze. "You're brave," she whispered. "Or foolish," he gave a half smile. "Both, maybe." Later, as night fell again, Rinna cooked a simple meal of roasted root bulbs and grain paste. They sat together on the floor, since the chairs were too small for him. The flickering lamp cast soft shadows across her scales, and Eli found himself staring at how her eyes reflected the light like liquid silver. She caught him looking and tilted her head. "What is it?" "Nothing," he said quickly. "Just, you look like you belong to the storm." "Calm after it passes." Rinna blinked, clearly taken aback. "Humans speak strangely," she murmured, though a small smile curved her lips. Silence settled between them again, not heavy this time, but gentle, like a bridge forming across two lonely worlds. Suddenly, a sharp beep came from her scanner. Rinna's expression changed instantly, fear. "What is it?" Eli asked, standing up at once. She turned the screen toward him, her hands shaking slightly. Motion sensors outside the perimeter, multiple life signs. Eli's face hardened. "Scavengers again?" "Yes," she whispered. "They didn't give up." He moved toward the door, but she caught his arm. "You can't fight them alone." Eli looked down at her hand on his arm, warm and trembling. "Then stay close and don't open that door for anyone." He grabbed his metal pipe, still dented from the night before, and stepped near the entrance. Rinna could hear the soft thumps of feet outside, circling, whispering, waiting. Her heart pounded in her chest, fear and something else. Worry for the strange human who had entered her life like a storm. When the first knock echoed through the dome, Eli didn't flinch. He stood tall, his silhouette filling the narrow space. Rinna watched from behind, realizing she had invited danger into her home. But as lightning flashed outside, and she saw Eli's determined eyes glowing in the blue light, she also knew something else. She had invited hope. And for the first time in years, she wasn't sure which scared her more, the danger outside or the feeling growing inside her heart. The night was quiet, but it was the kind of quiet that felt wrong. Rinna stood frozen near the console, her long fingers hovering over the switch for the external lights. The storm from the previous night had cleared, leaving the air sharp and heavy. The twin moons hanging low over Kareth 9's misty plains. Outside the dome, something moved, slow and deliberate, scraping against the metal walls. Eli's eyes narrowed as he listened, his grip firm on the iron pipe in his hand. He didn't speak, didn't breathe too loudly. "Only watch the shadows through the translucent glass," Rinna whispered. "There are more this time," her voice trembling slightly. "I count at least 6 shapes on the scanner." Eli nodded once. "Calm and steady. They're testing the walls, seeing how strong this place is." "Scavengers?" she asked. "Maybe," he said. "Or someone sent them." A low mechanical hum came from outside, followed by the hiss of a plasma cutter. Rinna gasped. "They're trying to breach the door." Eli stepped forward, placing his large body in front of the entryway. "Stay back, Rinna," he said, voice deep and commanding. "If they get through, you run to the back chamber and seal it." She shook her head. "That room has no exit. Then you stay behind me," he replied without hesitation. Through the thin glass, she could see their outlines, tall figures wearing scavenger masks, their eyes glowing faint red, tools in hand. The hum grew louder, and sparks started to fly from the door hinge. Eli didn't wait. He slammed the emergency lock switch, sealing the lower bolts, then turned to Rinna. "Is there another exit?" "Only the air vent, too small for you," she said quickly. "They're cutting through." Eli crouched beside the door, his muscles tense like coiled steel. When the panel finally burst open with a flash of blue light, the first scavenger stepped through, metallic armor glinting under the lamp's glow. Before the intruder could raise his weapon, Eli charged. The human's shoulder hit the alien square in the chest, throwing him back through the doorway with a crash. The others shouted, rushing in, but Eli was faster, swinging the iron pipe with force that echoed through the small house. Metal met metal, sparks flying as the aliens stumbled back, shouting in their guttural tongue. Rinna ducked behind a table, heart racing. She had seen humans fight in vids before, but never in person. There was something raw about the way Eli moved. Not graceful, but unstoppable. Every strike he made was simple and heavy, built on years of hard labor. When one scavenger managed to slash his arm again, Eli didn't fall, didn't even slow down. He grabbed the attacker's wrist and twisted until the blade dropped, then threw him into another raider. "Get out," he shouted in a voice that shook the walls. The intruders hesitated, not expecting resistance from one man. Rinna grabbed a welding torch and flicked it on, the bright blue flame hissing in the air. "Go!" she yelled at them, her voice trembling but fierce. The scavengers looked between the glowing torch and the bloodied human and finally ran, disappearing into the shadows. Silence fell again, broken only by Eli's heavy breathing. He leaned against the doorframe, pipe still in hand, blood dripping down his sleeve. Rinna rushed to him, dropping the torch. "You're hurt again." He smiled weakly. "You should see the other guys." She scowled, grabbing her medical kit and pulling him toward the small bench. "Sit before you collapse." He obeyed, lowering himself carefully so he wouldn't break another chair. Rinna cleaned his wound. Her fingers gentle but quick. The cut was deep, and the green antiseptic foam sizzled softly as it sealed the skin. Eli flinched but said nothing, his eyes fixed on her face. "Why do they keep coming?" she muttered. "No one bothers me here. Ever." Eli sighed. "Because they saw a human here, and they think I've got valuables, weapons. Maybe tech." Rinna shook her head. "You don't even have a working ship." "Yeah," he said with a tired grin. "But they don't know that." When the repairs were done, she sat beside him exhausted. Her small frame barely reached his shoulder as she leaned back against the wall. "You should have run," she whispered. "They could have killed you." He looked down at her, eyes calm. "I don't run when someone depends on me." The simple words hit her harder than she expected. No one had said anything like that to her since her mate died in that mining collapse. She looked away quickly, pretending to focus on the flickering lights. Outside, the rain had started again, soft and rhythmic. Inside, the silence was filled with the sound of her heart beating too fast. After a while, Rinna broke the silence. Her voice small. "Eli, why do you help me? You could have left after the storm." He thought for a moment, then said quietly, "Because you opened the door when no one else would." Rinna turned her head toward him. Her eyes wide, he smiled faintly. "That's worth protecting." For the first time, she couldn't find words to answer. The fear that had filled her dome the night before now felt different, still strong, but mixed with something warm, something dangerous. As Eli finally leaned back and closed his eyes, exhausted, Rinna whispered to herself, "Maybe letting you in was not a mistake after all." And as lightning flashed once more across the violet sky, she knew that this bulky, stubborn human had already changed the quiet rhythm of her world forever. When morning arrived, the world outside was peaceful again. The twin suns of Kareth 9 rose slowly, painting the misty plains gold and lavender. Rinna opened the small metal shutters, letting the light spill into her little dome home. The scent of wet earth and burning ozone drifted through the air. She turned and found Eli already awake, sitting quietly near the doorway, repairing his torn jacket with thick, clumsy stitches. He looked tired, his eyes shadowed but calm. For a man who had fought half a dozen scavengers the night before, he seemed strangely at ease. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked softly, pouring water into a kettle. "Didn't want to break your floor," he said with a half smile. "Your bed looks like it would collapse if I sneezed." Rinna chuckled quietly, shaking her head. "You humans and your size." The night's chaos still lingered between them. Though neither wanted to mention it, the smashed table had been pushed aside, and burn marks from her torch were still on the floor. Rinna watched Eli move, strong but careful, like he was afraid of damaging anything else. When she handed him a mug of warm kelroot brew, their fingers brushed. It was a small moment, but her chest tightened and she quickly turned away, pretending to adjust the controls on the console. Outside, the wind had softened, and distant sounds of machinery meant the colony's systems were slowly coming back online. "Looks like the grid's recovering," Eli said. Glancing at the blinking lights on her display, Rinna nodded. "Yes, but it'll take hours before the patrols make their rounds." He leaned back slightly. "Then we should fix your fence before they come. Don't want your neighbors asking questions." She blinked at him. "You plan to stay?" Eli shrugged. "Until your power's stable." At least he didn't mention the real reason. He didn't have anywhere else to go. When he stepped outside, Rinna followed him, curious. The ground was damp and soft, and sunlight reflected off the puddles like glass. Eli knelt down beside a broken fence post, his large hands moving with surprising precision. He straightened the bent metal and used a melted scrap from his ship to reinforce it. Rinna watched silently, her tail flicking in thought. For someone so rough-looking, he worked with quiet care. Every strike of his tool was measured, every motion patient. He even stopped once to help a tiny insect-like creature escape from under a board. When he finally stood, wiping sweat from his forehead, Rinna said softly, "You don't have to do this." He looked at her and smiled faintly. "You helped me when no one else would. Feels right to return the favor." Something about the way he said it made her heart beat faster. Before she could reply, a sharp humming sound cut through the air. A patrol drone descended from above, its scanner light sweeping across the property. Eli froze instantly. The drone's robotic voice spoke. "Unregistered human detected. Please state authorization code." Rinna's pulse spiked. If the drone reported him, the colony guards would arrive in minutes. She stepped forward quickly, forcing a calm tone. "He's my worker," she said, her voice steady but her heart racing. "I hired him after the storm." The drone scanned her ID, paused for a moment, then beeped. Record updated. Temporary worker registered, then it flew away. Leaving silence behind, Eli turned to her. Surprise written on his face? "You didn't have to lie for me," he said quietly. Rinna crossed her arms, looking anywhere but at him. "It wasn't a lie. You were helping. Still," he said with a small smile. "You risked a fine." "I'll survive," she replied. "Besides, I don't like how they treat outsiders," he tilted his head. "You sound like someone who knows what it feels like." She didn't answer right away, just stared out toward the shimmering horizon. "I used to," she whispered. "After my mate died. The others looked at me like I was broken, like I should have gone with him." Eli's voice softened. "I know that look." When she met his gaze, there was no judgment there, only quiet understanding. It was strange how easy it was to talk to him, like the silence between them was safe, not empty. By afternoon, they had finished repairing the fence and replaced 2 solar panels. The dome glowed brighter, the lights stable again. Inside, Rinna cooked a simple stew, and Eli tried not to hit his head while helping her reach the top shelf. They laughed when he almost tripped over her tools for the first time in a long while. Her home didn't feel lonely after dinner. Rinna noticed Eli staring out the window. "What are you thinking?" she asked. He didn't look at her. "Just wondering how long I can stay before I cause you more trouble." She frowned. "You saved my life twice. I think you've earned a little trouble." He smiled faintly. "I don't want people turning on you because of me." "Let them talk," she said quietly. "I know what I saw. A man who fought to protect someone he didn't even know." For a moment, neither spoke. The only sound was the soft hum of the repaired generator and the gentle crackle of the heating coil. Then Rinna said softly, "Eli, you can stay as long as you want." He looked at her, his tired eyes warming. "You sure?" She nodded once, firm but gentle. "It's a tight squeeze," she said, her lips curving slightly. "But I think we'll manage." He laughed quietly. The sound deep and rough as night fell again over Kareth 9. The human and the alien sat side by side, watching the stars shimmer beyond the glass dome. Neither of them said it out loud, but they both felt it. The world had changed since the storm. 2 strangers had become something more than survivors. They had become each other's shelter. The next morning began like a calm dream. Soft light from the twin suns filtered through the glass dome, bathing Rinna's small home in golden violet hues. Eli was outside early, already working on the solar cells that had burned out during the storm. His sleeves were rolled up, and every move he made was steady, practiced, patient. Rinna stood by the window watching him, her heart strangely unsettled. Each morning since he'd stayed had begun this way, with quiet peace, the kind she hadn't known in years. But this morning something felt different. Something heavy lingered in the air. The colony wasn't silent anymore. In the distance, faint murmurs echoed, like the sound of curious eyes turning in their direction. By midday, the first visitor arrived. A small hoverbike stopped near the fence, and a thin alien male stepped off, his eyes narrow and sharp. Rinna's breath caught. She recognized him instantly. "Terrell," she whispered under her breath. Eli looked up from the tools and wiped his hands on his jacket. Watching the newcomer approach, Terrell was her late mate's brother, a man who had never liked humans and never forgiven Rinna for surviving when his brother hadn't. "What are you doing here, Terrell?" Rinna asked as he crossed the gate. He sneered. "I should ask you that, sister-in-law. Rumors spread fast." "You know." Eli's jaw tensed, but he said nothing, choosing instead to keep working on the panel. Terrell's eyes flicked to him with disgust. "So it's true you're keeping a human in your home?" Rinna's tail twitched in irritation. "He's helping me repair the systems." "Helping?" Terrell repeated mockingly. "That's what you call it?" Rinna's voice grew firm. "You're not welcome here." Terrell stepped closer, his tone rising. "You bring shame to our family, Rinna. After all that happened in the mines, you bring him here?" Eli finally stood, wiping sweat from his brow, his voice even but heavy. "If you have a problem with me, say it straight." Terrell turned on him with a hiss. "You humans killed my brother." Eli's eyes met his coldly. "No, the mine did, poor maintenance, bad leadership, not me." "You expect me to believe that?" Terrell snapped. Eli's voice remained calm. but it carried the weight of truth. I was there. I saw what happened. Your brother saved lives that day. Rinna looked between them, her heart pounding. She had never heard anyone speak about that day so openly. Terrell's expression faltered for just a moment, before he spat on the ground and turned away. You'll regret trusting him, sister. Then he stormed off, his hoverbike disappearing down the dusty path. Silence filled the air after he left. Eli exhaled slowly, setting down the tool in his hand. Sorry for that, he muttered. Rinna shook her head. You don't need to apologize. But she could see the pain in his eyes. That single accusation had reopened scars he had tried to bury. People will talk, she said quietly. They'll judge. Even if they don't know the truth, Eli shrugged. They've been doing that since I was born. Not much changes. There was no anger in his tone, only tiredness, the kind that came from carrying too much alone. Later that day, more visitors came, neighbors who usually kept their distance. They came with polite smiles and too many questions. Is it true? One asked, you're harboring a human? He's a mechanic, Rinna replied simply. And a good one. Some nodded uncertainly. Others whispered behind her back as they left. Eli pretended not to notice, but his eyes were distant that night. As they shared a quiet meal, Rinna said softly, You could leave if you want, find another place to stay. Eli looked at her, surprise flashing across his face. Do you want me to? He asked. She hesitated, then shook her head. No, I don't want you to suffer because of me. He leaned back, his expression thoughtful. Rinna, I've been alone a long time. I can handle whispers. But I'm not running again. Her chest tightened at his words. There was something in the way he said it, a promise, steady and simple she wanted to argue. But she couldn't. Instead, she whispered, Then we face it together. He smiled faintly. Together sounds good. As the suns dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the room, Rinna found herself replaying the day's moments. The anger in Terrell's eyes, the suspicion of the neighbors, and Eli's calm courage through it all. She realized something had shifted deep inside her. Eli wasn't just a guest anymore. He had become part of her world, whether the colony approved or not. Before they turned in for the night, Rinna brought out an old music orb her mate had left behind. It hummed to life, filling the small dome with soft, ancient melodies. Eli listened quietly, his gaze fixed on the glowing patterns that danced across the walls. That's beautiful, he murmured. Rinna smiled faintly. It was his favorite. They sat together in silence, the air heavy with memories and unspoken feelings. And as the music faded into the night, Rinna whispered under her breath, He would have liked you. Eli, the bulky human looked at her with gentle surprise, then smiled. Then I'd have liked him too. Outside, far beyond the dome, the colony lights flickered like distant stars, and though the world around them whispered judgment, inside that small home, an unlikely friendship was slowly turning into something far deeper, something neither of them dared to name, but both of them already felt. The next sunrise came with a strange silence over the colony. The air was heavy, filled with the faint hum of energy lines trying to restart after days of unstable power. Rinna stepped outside her dome, stretching under the pale light of the twin suns. The storm was long gone, yet a sense of tension still lingered, like the calm before something big. Eli was already awake, cleaning the tools he'd used to repair the solar grid, his massive frame hunched over a small table that looked far too fragile for him. He glanced up and gave her a faint grin. Morning, engineer, she smiled. Morning, troublemaker. But her light mood faded when the colony sirens wailed suddenly, their deep notes echoing across the valley. Rinna froze, her eyes snapping toward the horizon. That's the mining sector alarm, she whispered. Something's gone wrong. Eli's expression hardened instantly. Another collapse? Rinna checked the small comms pad attached to her wrist, the display flashing red. Yes, grid section 12. Underground tunnels are unstable. There are workers trapped inside. Without hesitation, Eli grabbed his jacket and moved toward the door. Eli, wait! Rinna shouted. The tunnels are sealed. It's too dangerous. He looked back at her, eyes fierce and steady. You've seen what happens when people wait. Her chest tightened. That's not your responsibility. He paused just long enough to meet her gaze. It is now. Within minutes, Eli was at the mining site on the colony's outskirts. Dust and smoke filled the air as engineers and security officers rushed around in panic. Rinna followed him, her heart pounding as she weaved through the crowd. The site commander, a tall insectoid alien with bright yellow eyes, spotted Eli and immediately shouted, "Human!" "You're not allowed here." Eli ignored him and kept walking, grabbing a discarded breathing mask from a crate. "I worked in tunnels like these for 10 years, he said calmly. "You need strength to clear the beams, not orders from someone standing outside." The commander hissed in anger. "We don't need your help." Before he could finish, a deep rumble shook the ground beneath them. The tunnel entrance collapsing further. Screams echoed from inside. Rinna's voice trembled. "There are still people in there." Eli turned to the commander. "Either move aside or live knowing you let them die." The commander hesitated, but Rinna stepped forward, voice sharp and sure. "Let him go. He can do what none of us can." Eli didn't wait for permission. He pulled on the mask, ducked low and disappeared into the dark tunnel. The heat and dust hit him immediately, thick and choking. He moved through the narrow corridors, his large shoulders scraping against the walls. Sparks flickered from broken power cables and the air smelled of burnt metal. He could hear faint cries deeper in the tunnel, voices calling for help. "Hang on!" he shouted, his voice echoing through the darkness. When he reached the main chamber, a massive steel beam had fallen, trapping 3 alien miners beneath it. Their eyes widened when they saw him. "A human?" one gasped. "Yeah," Eli said, gripping the beam. "And I'm here to get you out." With a deep breath, he braced his legs and lifted, muscles straining. The metal groaned but didn't move. He tried again, roaring through clenched teeth. This time, the beam shifted just enough for one miner to crawl free. Rinna's voice crackled faintly through the comms. "Eli, can you hear me?" "Yeah," he panted. "Got one out, 2 more stuck, but the tunnel's getting worse." She replied quickly. "You have to get out before it collapses again." He gritted his teeth. "Not yet." Using a broken rod as leverage, he lifted again, the beam rising inch by inch. "Go!" he shouted to the remaining 2. "Now!" They scrambled free just as the tunnel ceiling began to crumble. Eli shoved them toward the exit, then dove forward as the beam crashed down behind him, sending a cloud of dust into the air. When he stumbled out of the tunnel, covered in dirt and blood, the crowd erupted in disbelief. The rescued miners clung to him, shaking and coughing, their eyes filled with tears. Rinna ran to him, her heart pounding. "You idiot," she whispered, voice breaking. "You could have died." Eli smiled faintly, his voice hoarse. "Would have been worse to let them die instead." The site commander stepped forward, eyes wide. "You saved them." Rinna turned to the commander sharply. "Yes, he did, and you wanted to stop him." The alien officer bowed his head in shame. "We were wrong about him, about humans." Word spread through the colony before the suns even set. The same neighbors who once whispered now spoke Eli's name with respect. Some called him reckless, others brave, but all agreed he had done what few dared to do that night. Rinna sat beside him outside the dome as the stars glittered overhead. She handed him a cup of kelroot brew and he smiled tiredly. "Everyone's talking about you," she said softly. "Good or bad?" he asked with a smirk. "Mostly good," she said, her voice warm. "They saw your heart today." Eli stared at the twin moons for a long time, then said quietly, "Guess that's worth a few bruises." Rinna looked at him, the human who had walked into her life from a storm and risked everything for people who once hated him. And as the night wind brushed against them, she whispered, "You've given them something they forgot, hope." Eli turned to her, his voice low and gentle. "And what about you, Rinna? Did I give you that too?" She didn't answer, but the way she smiled said more than words ever could. In that quiet moment with the stars of Kareth 9 above them, she knew loyalty wasn't just about protection, it was about trust, about standing beside someone when the world turned away, and she would never turn away from him again. A few weeks had passed since the tunnel collapse, but the story of the bulky human who saved the miners still echoed through every corner of Kareth 9. Every market, every workshop, every plaza whispered his name. Eli Ward, the human who defied fear, who lifted steel like it weighed nothing, who saved lives when others hesitated. To most aliens, he had become a living legend, a symbol that perhaps humans weren't the monsters old stories claimed. But to Rinna, he was something far simpler, and far more complicated. He was the man who filled her once silent home with life, noise, warmth, and laughter. He was the one who made her dome feel like a place where she finally belonged again. The colony council called an emergency assembly a few days later. Rinna and Eli stood near the edge of the crowd as the chief administrator, a tall crystalline being whose voice shimmered through speakers, addressed the people. "We owe our survival to cooperation," the administrator said, "and this human has reminded us that courage knows no species." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Then, in front of everyone, the administrator turned toward Eli and Rinna. "For his actions and for her guidance, both will receive honorary citizen status." Eli's eyes widened slightly. "Honorary?" he whispered to Rinna. She smiled. "It means you finally exist here." The crowd cheered, a sound that vibrated through the open air, and for the first time, Eli didn't feel like an outsider standing in a borrowed place. He belonged. When they returned home that evening, something unexpected waited for them. Half the neighborhood had gathered near Rinna's dome, carrying tools, metal beams, and glowing panels. Rinna blinked in confusion. "What's all this?" An older alien stepped forward, smiling kindly. "We thought your home could use an upgrade for..." "Both of you," Eli frowned. "You mean, make it bigger?" The elder nodded. "We heard it's a tight squeeze." Laughter spread through the group. Light and good-natured, Rinna covered her mouth to hide a smile, her heart swelling with something she hadn't felt in years. Acceptance. Within hours, the small dome was surrounded by busy hands. Welding, measuring, adjusting. Eli helped too, despite everyone insisting he rest, his strength turning heavy tasks effortless. By nightfall, the new home stood finished, stronger, taller, wider, with 2 doors side by side, one fit for a human, one for a Tyrell. As they stood beneath the glowing roof, Rinna whispered, "It's beautiful." Eli looked around, rubbing the back of his neck. "Didn't think I'd ever live somewhere made for me." She smiled softly. "It's made for us." The words slipped out before she could stop them, and both went still for a heartbeat. Then she looked down, her cheeks glowing faint gold. "I mean, for our sizes," Eli chuckled quietly. "Sure, for our sizes." But the warmth in his voice said he heard the truth beneath her fluster. Later that evening, they sat outside under the twin moons, the air cool and gentle. The colony lights shimmered across the valley like rivers of fireflies. Rinna leaned back on the steps, her gaze lost in the stars. "You could leave now," she said softly. "Your ship's fixed, the colony respects you. You could go anywhere." Eli didn't answer at first, he just watched the horizon, the faint glimmer of his repaired vessel parked near the ridge. Then he said quietly, "I could, but there's nothing waiting out there." She turned toward him, her voice barely above a whisper. "And what's here?" He met her eyes, his expression calm but filled with something deep, something that finally feels like home. The words hung between them, carried by the soft night wind. Rinna looked away, her heart beating too fast. She wanted to tell him she felt the same, that his presence had brought color back into her life, that his laughter had replaced the silence she once feared. But before she could speak, a group of children ran past their dome, laughing and shouting. One of them, a small alien girl with bright silver eyes, called out, "Human, my brother says you're a hero." Eli grinned, waving, "Tell your brother I just got lucky." Rinna laughed, the sound gentle and free. "You'll never admit it, will you?" He shrugged. "Hero's a heavy word. I just did what anyone should." "Not everyone would," she said softly. "That's what makes you different." Inside the new dome, the light from the hearth cast soft golden patterns across the walls. Eli glanced around at the widened room, the sturdy furniture, the shared tools neatly stacked in the corner. "This place fits better," he said with a small smile. "No more bumping my head every 5 minutes," Rinna smiled back. "Told you it just needed a few adjustments." He tilted his head, teasing, "You sure you're not the one adjusting to me?" Her laughter filled the space, bright and unguarded. "Maybe a little," she admitted, then softer. "But it was worth it." As the night deepened, the two sat quietly side by side. Rinna's head rested gently against Eli's arm, her eyes half closed as she whispered, "Do you think they'll always accept us?" Eli looked down at her and said, "Doesn't matter." "Why?" she asked sleepily. "Because we already accept each other," he said simply. The moons glowed brighter overhead, reflecting off the glass of their newly built home. It was no longer just a shelter. It was a symbol of something fragile and real, a human and an alien who had found belonging in each other's worlds. What started as a desperate knock during a storm had become a bond strong enough to reshape hearts in a colony. When Rinna finally drifted to sleep beside him, Eli whispered into the quiet, tight squeeze or not, "I'm never leaving," and outside, the gentle wind of Kareth 9 carried his words into the stars, a promise soft but unbreakable, between two souls who had learned that home isn't built by walls. It's built by hearts that finally fit.